Co-founder of the firm and the firm manager of Scaringi Law, a full-service firm headquartered in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, with 6 offices located throughout South Central Pennsylvania. Mr. Scaringi previously served as executive assistant to the Pennsylvania Attorney General Mike Fisher in Harrisburg, and as legislative correspondent to U.S. Senator Rick Santorum in Washington, D.C. Mr. Scaringi ran for the United States Senate in 2012, and then won an election as Donald J. Trump's endorsed delegate from the 4th Congressional District to the Republican National Convention in 2016. Mr. Scaringi hosts his own weekly talk radio show on Saturdays, 1 p.m. in WHP 580 AM News Talk Radio and iHeartRadio. His talk show has been featured on Voice of America and international news media such as Le Figaro? Le Figaro, okay. La Repubblica. Welt, that sounds contagious. And Good Morning Costa Rica. Mrs. Scaringi writes a bi-weekly column for Penn Live and the Harrisburg Patriot News, and has been published by the American Thinker and the Western Journal, among others. He's also a political commentator who has appeared on MSNBC and PCN, and has been quoted in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and USA Today. Regrettably, Mr. Scaringi has even generated some national news about his hair. The GQ article, A Field Guide to Bad Conservative Hair, puts Mr. Scaringi on the list of conservatives with former speakers of the House, Newt Gingrich and Paul Ryan, and talk show host Sean Hannity, and Rush Limbaugh, among others, for having questionable haircuts. The article is obviously fake news, as we know. To find out more about Mr. Scaringi, check out his website at scaringilaw.com and themarcscaringishow.com. Friend or follow him on Facebook and Twitter at Marc Scaringi. So without further ado, yours truly, Marc Scaringi.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you for that kind introduction. Very well spoken. Very well written, too. I wrote it myself just before I got down here. But thank you so much. I'm honored to be with you here today, and I applaud the Adams County Republican Club in your efforts to ensure the freedom of thought and expression in local Republican politics as well as at the state and national party level. We must always be vigilant in ensuring the voices of the grassroots Republican activists are heard in the corridors of power at the local level as well as in Harrisburg and in Washington, D.C. Now, as the great Admiral James Stockdale once said during a vice presidential debate, who am I and why am I here? The who am I? I'm a sometime politician, political activist, a full-time lawyer, talk radio host, and columnist. Why am I here? Well, you'll have to ask your speakers committee. I want to thank John Taylor for providing me with this opportunity. So if I bomb or worse, bore you, please don't blame John. I told him I'm an exciting and dynamic speaker, and he believed me. First, a little background on the who am I question. Like many college graduates, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, so I decided to go to law school. But before starting classes in the fall of 1994, I'm getting old, I wanted to spend that summer in what I thought would be a worthy cause. So I entered politics, right? A worthy cause. Down the street from where I worked was the campaign office of a young congressman running for the U.S. Senate, Rick Santorum. And hold the applause. I walked into that campaign office and was offered a job right on the spot for a grand total of $0 per hour. Plus, I got to pay my own expenses. And I gladly accepted because
you should have come to work for me. I was a little bit better.
Because the minute I walked into the office with the phones ringing constantly and volunteers stuffing envelopes and campaign workers running to and fro with that look of earnestness and seriousness as if the world depended upon their every move, I was hooked. And I was put in charge of groups such as Farmers for Santorum, Physicians for Santorum, and Italian Americans for Santorum. And I traveled all over Pennsylvania touting Rick's record and positions. And I often found myself in unusual and interesting places, such as the table of honor at the Bedford County Farm Bureau dinner, sitting next to the Bedford County Dairy Princess. There I watched and learned as she gave that royal wave to the good farmers of Bedford County. I was also assigned to be the full-time aide to Aldo Santorum, Rick's now deceased father. Aldo had been born in Italy under the reign of Benito Mussolini, and his family fled fascism and came to America. So we went to every Italian-American club we could find. And Aldo would get up on stage and start talking about his son's candidacy, but then he would veer off script and start lambasting Mussolini and Italian fascism in Italian. And as a young political aide, this was my first encounter with the problem, how to stop your candidate from going off the rails. Much later and more recently, I volunteered on the presidential campaign of Donald Trump, so I have some experience in this area. For the end of the campaign, Santorum, I'm sure you'll probably all remember this, he was asked by a college student about how to ensure the solvency of Social Security for their generation. In defying standard political wisdom, Santorum answered the question honestly, and he paid the price. He said, "We need to increase the retirement age to 67, and I'd go even further if I could." And I can still hear those words ringing in my ears because they were repeated on every radio and television station across Pennsylvania every day until the end of the campaign. Now, polls had us up 12 points until Santorum gave that answer a little over 2 weeks out of Election Day. We plunged in the polls to a few points down a day or two before the election. But as you know, we squeaked it out. We won by just over 2% of the vote. How? Well, Santorum got the conservative Republican base out and did well with blue-collar Democrats. So the question, did Santorum 94 pave the way for Trump 2016? Republicans won major victories across the country that year and regained control of Congress for the first time since the 50s. The media labeled it the year of the angry white male. Interestingly, the media labeled the election year previous, 1992, the year of the woman. Not the angry woman or the angry white female, just the celebratory and lovely year of the woman. Is the media fair and balanced? Maybe not. Well, Santorum took me with him to Washington, and I started to work in the Senate on day one of that first Republican Revolution. And those really were the halcyon days of my youth. The days of the contract with America, Newt Gingrich being elected Speaker of the House, and my boss leading the fight in the Senate. We got into those dramatic standoffs with President Clinton, you may remember. The media, of course, demonized us for wanting to cut Medicare and kill off Big Bird and Ernie and Bert. We shut down the government twice to force President Clinton to accept our budget cuts that really just reduced the rate of the significant increase in the budget by a few points. The media, however, blamed the Republicans. Clinton won, and we lost in the eyes of the American people. In the spring of 1996, Santorum sent me to Harrisburg to work on then State Senator Mike Fisher's campaign for Attorney General. And the Fisher 96 campaign was similar to the Santorum 94 election. Both were conservative Republicans from Pittsburgh running against liberal Democrats from Philadelphia. And in both cases, we were losing most of election night until the votes came in from the rural counties of central Pennsylvania in the famed T, which Adams, of course, serves as the base for. In both cases, we started to turn the tide around 11 p.m. and ended up winning late and very close. Like Santorum, we won by about 2% of the vote. Does this sound familiar to Donald Trump's president election in 2016? And by the way, with some foreboding of the 2016 presidential campaign, the media got the Fisher race so wrong, the Associated Press actually called the win for our opponent, and he got up to give his victory speech and then had to kind of retract, and then they called the race for us after the T came in. And Fisher took me with him to Harrisburg, where I worked as executive assistant to the Attorney General. By the spring of 2001, he was running for governor, and he asked me to join his campaign as policy director, and I did for a bit. But regrettably, I had lost my zeal for politics by that stage in life, and after a few months, I resigned my position. I left politics to enter a more honest profession, The law. I had grown tired of writing speeches and working policy, and it seemed indirect and impersonal and disconnected from reality, and I wanted to work with people in a direct way and have a real impact in the lives of what I thought were real people, not politicians, lobbyists, and political activists, real, live, everyday people. And practicing in the areas of divorce, custody, DUI, and criminal defense, boy did I ever. By 2005, my wife and I started our own law firm and began growing and expanding. We have 15 attorneys working out of 6 offices across central Pennsylvania, including here in Gettysburg. And over those years, I was minding my own business and building my own business when along came Barack Obama. That and the financial crisis of 2008 with the massive government bailout of the failed Wall Street investment banks that pushed me out of my private life once again and back into politics. See, I knew the Republican Party, my party, would be no different from the Democratic Party, and both would put Wall Street over Main Street in their attempt to fix the crisis they had caused. And I was energized by the Tea Party movement that was sweeping the country at that time, so I decided to run for the Republican nomination to the United States Senate. The United Press International's headline read, "Ex-Santorum aide planned Senate run." The Daily Caller, "Former Santorum aide eyes U.S. Senate seat." The first sentence of the article, "An ex-aide to Pennsylvania Rick Santorum wants to reclaim what his old boss lost in '06. I thought, reclaim? I hadn't said more than a few words to Santorum in the intervening 17 years. My campaign was largely a rejection of the Bush-era big government policies that Santorum was so much a part of, and actually Santorum did not support my run and was working with the Republican establishment to find someone else to run that race. So for the while, the media associated me as the Santorum candidate. But I remember constantly having to say wherever I went, I'm not Rick Santorum, I'm my own man. After people heard me speak and watched my campaign, I then became known in the media as the Tea Party candidate, and I thought that more accurately fit the bill. The Harrisburg Patriot News even referred to me as the citizen politician the Founding Fathers dreamed of running the government. Well, I thought they hit the nail right on the head with that line, and I thought that was an excellent analysis. Yes, it was a real long shot, but stranger things had happened in that election cycle. Political neophytes backed by the Tea Party in 2010 won Republican U.S. Senate primaries in Alaska, Nevada, and Delaware, you'll remember. And I felt no career politician would be crazy enough to challenge Bob Casey. And so I would have a chance at least to win the nomination. But wealthy Republican donors were sitting this one out, and I couldn't raise the money. The Republican establishment in Harrisburg didn't want me. They actually endorsed a candidate who was most recently a Democrat and had voted for Barack Obama in the 2008 primary. They wanted me out of the race. The Republican governor at the time even offered to support me in running for a different office if I backed out. But that's not the kind of man I am. I was in it to win it, as Hillary Clinton said. Maybe that's not the best comparison. But toward the end of the campaign, I started to pick up some support from Ron Paul activists, and several of my positions were similar to his. And I came close to getting his endorsement in the final days of the campaign, which would have been pretty spectacular, but alas, that was not to be. So I started out in the race as the ex-Santorum aide, then became the Tea Party candidate, and then ended up being the Ron Paul candidate. But all along, I was and remained the Marc Scaringi candidate, but that name didn't sell papers, didn't generate clicks, or win the election. So after the primary, I went back to my law practice. And in the fall of 2015, I found myself hosting a weekly talk radio show called The Marc Scaringi Show on WHYL 960 AM in Carlisle. And I paid a marketing firm about $5,000 to come up with that name. What do you think of the name? Was it pretty innovative? But I was a little nervous. I had never hosted a radio show before, so I was trying to think about how I can fill all of that airtime. So what I did is I prepared a book review for my first show, oddly enough. The book, Crippled America, How to Make America Great Again by Donald J. Trump. It was a quick and easy read. The phones, they lit up. And I quickly learned that if you want calls, clicks, and ratings, talk about Donald Trump. Speaking of which, in December of that year, the Trump campaign came to me and asked if I would help organize his effort in Pennsylvania. Of course, nobody else at the time was organizing for Trump. I immediately said yes. You see, I was for Trump from the very first presidential debate. I've been waiting all of my political career for a candidate who would put America first on what I thought were the three biggest issues that had done so much harm to America: free trade, open borders, and endless foreign wars. Now, this was about the time of the annual Pennsylvania Society Weekend in New York City, where all the Republican political and business big shots, they gather to congratulate themselves for being rich and powerful. And the Pennsylvania GOP had invited Trump to be the guest speaker at the lunch at the Plaza Hotel. Well, this was about a month before the first primary, and Trump had been atop the polls for several months, but he was still considered persona non grata by the Republican establishment. So I'm sure you'll all remember this. And earlier that week, Trump had announced his controversial Muslim travel ban. The media had gone berserk. My own publisher at Penn Live and the Patriot News called for the GOP to withdraw Trump's invitation. Pennsylvania Republican heavyweights like former Governor Tom Ridge declined to attend because of Trump's presence. U.S. Senator Pat Toomey said he couldn't make it. His schedule was busy, I guess. But that weekend turned out to be one of the most surreal experiences of my life. As my family and I were walking out of our hotel to make my way to the luncheon at the Plaza, we walked into a mass of protesters, media, tourists, and New Yorkers who had come to gawk at the spectacle that was unfolding. The singer, Lady Gaga, was arriving at a restaurant just to the left of our hotel, while Trump was arriving at the Plaza just to the right of our hotel. So out of my left eye, I saw a flash of big, beautiful Lady Gaga hair. And out of my right eye, I saw a flash of big, beautiful Donald Trump hair. And my kids and wife headed to Gaga, and I headed to Trump. But I will never forget the lunch at the Plaza. I walked into this ornate dining room. Has anybody ever been to the Plaza Hotel? Beautiful ornate dining room, gilded with gold leaf. Took my seat, and Donald Trump kind of saunters out to the podium. He kind of slumps over the top of the podium, and he begins to give these off-the-cuff remarks. No notes, all anecdotal. He immediately saw how beautiful the dining room looks and took credit for it, claiming that he redecorated it a while back when he used to own the Plaza. He then sees a businessman in the audience who I guess he had a business deal with, and he starts talking to him about the business deal in the middle of this speech. He then talks about how Pennsylvania is winning on Marcellus Shale. He's lamenting how liberal New York Governor Andrew Cuomo wouldn't let New Yorkers drill in New York, and he accuses Pennsylvanians of running underground pipes up into New York to suck that gas down into Pennsylvania before he could make money off it. His performance was riveting. And one of my table mates told me he'd been coming to these luncheons at the Plaza for many, many years, and he had never seen this before. And he pointed to the upstairs balcony that surrounds the dining room. And it looked like every single member of the kitchen staff and the wait staff was lining up and standing quietly in awe and listening to Donald Trump speak. And as someone who has slept through probably hundreds of politician speeches, I knew right then that Trump was going to win. Trump connected with everyday, average people in a way our friends in the media could not and will never understand, because they don't work in the kitchen of the Plaza. They dine in its beautiful dining room. Then the disruption started. Right behind me, some young men stood up and started singing, "Mama, mama, tell me why our people gotta die? Trump is trying to bring us down, attacking people black and brown." As security surrounded the group, it looked like a rugby match had broken out, and it moved right behind me and knocked a couple of chairs over and a light fixture right beside me. They moved those protesters out of the dining room. You could hear some of them falling down the marble staircase. You could hear these thuds that were made. They brought police dogs through the dining room, and security was kind of swarming all around us. And as I'm dining, German shepherds are being marched through the room. Trump, well, he's still speaking. he doesn't skip a beat. An additional group started standing up and chanting various songs and chants and such. And as they're removing physically these people from the room, Trump is saying, hey, what kind of people are you letting into the plaza these days? He asked the hecklers if they paid for their tickets, and he's saying, make sure they pay, make sure they pay. And then he tells the GOP organizers that they're not charging enough for the luncheon. So after the speech, people sat around in bewilderment, trying to process what had just happened. Now, I was supposed to meet a good friend of mine and our families for a trip up to the Central Park Zoo. Now, my friend is a little bit mischievous, and he texts me and tells me to come out the side entrance because there's somebody who wants me to meet. Now, unbeknownst to me, the media had gathered there. The main entrance had been shut down because of the massive protesters. Plus, the media had been drawn there and had gotten themselves worked up into a frenzy because that's where the security guards were kind of tossing, pushing, or escorting the protesters out of the plaza. Plus, the Trump speech was closed to the media, so they were dying to find out what was happening up there. So I walked outside onto that crowded, boisterous sidewalk and went up to my friend, and the man he wanted me to meet, the man stuck a microphone right in my face and starts peppering me with questions about what had happened. As soon as he did that, all the other media then swarmed around me, and they do the same. Those big lights go up, the boom mics come out, the cameras turned on. It was heaven. Here, my friend had discovered this guy was the New York Daily News reporter, waiting for Trump to sneak out the side door. My friend told the guy that he will deliver him one of Trump's top campaign officials, which was not entirely true. It was not, but the media thought I was for one brief, shining moment. And there I was holding court with maybe 20 or 30 television, print, and radio reporters. And with those lights and the cameras, the microphones surrounding me, I entered full Trump mode. I started talking about how we're going to build a wall, Mexico's going to pay for it. I started bashing China, and so we're going to take our jobs back and make America great again. I'm having the time of my life. The reporters are waiting on every word with bated breath. Although I did get a little bit nervous when one reporter said to me, and who are you again? Oh, the gig is about to be up. Now I'm lapping up all of this attention. The Black Lives Matters groups and the Muslim protesters had gathered around me and on both sides of me, and they had their Trump is Vanilla Ice banner up right behind me, and they started chanting, Trump boy go home, Trump boy back to the plaza. I guess I was Trump boy. And they literally enveloped me, and they started pulling me by the shoulder into them as they were pushing me down the sidewalk. But I wouldn't give up those microphones. I got the cameras, I got the microphones in my face, the flash bulbs are going off, and I'm channeling Trump, delivering his message, maybe even a little better than he delivers it sometimes himself. And so I look at my wife, she's distraught. I turn to my 7-year-old son who's bawling. I turned to my 9-year-old daughter, and she had a fierce look on her face. She ran toward the protesters, ready to kick them. And that's when the NYPD came up to me and said, you got to stop. You got to get back into the plaza. There are some very bad people in these groups. And then he said, this is going to blow. With that, I did go, reluctantly. It's really hard to give up those cameras. But I signaled an ABC TV reporter and said I'll meet her around the side. So I snuck back out, met the ABC News reporter, did an exclusive with her, and then she did a satellite feed right to Harrisburg. So when I went back to my hotel room, I was on every Manhattan, New York television station, and my friends are calling me from Harrisburg saying you're all over the Harrisburg Nightly News. So when I walked into those parties in the hotel rooms that evening, I went into those rooms to the cheers of my friends. I was a celebrity because I was all over the media. I'm on top of the world until I got a call from my Trump contact. And he says, Trump Tower called. And my first thought was, how does a building make a telephone call? I'm trying to picture this in my mind. He then said, I have 3 words to deliver to you from Trump Tower. Tone it down. And I thought, who do you think was watching the news over there in Trump Tower? Imagine that. Donald Trump telling me to tone it down. That's like the pot calling the kettle black. In any event, with the possible exception of Trump Tower, I was the toast of New York that night, or at least the few dozen drunk Republicans who would admit in public to supporting Trump at that point in the primary. Anyway, as the primary got underway, The better Trump performed, the stronger the opposition from the Republican establishment, and you all remember this. And I thought the nomination would come down to a floor fight at the convention, and the establishment would work hard to defeat Trump. So I decided to run for delegate to the convention. When many of the other candidates for delegate were hedging their bets about whom they would vote for at the convention, I declared I would vote for Donald Trump on the first ballot, on the second ballot, and on every ballot until he gets the nomination. To my delight, I was endorsed by none other than Donald J. Trump. He'd either forgiven or forgotten about the Plaza Hotel escapade. That I was a Trump delegate with a talk radio show attracted a lot of attention. I was featured on Voice of America. It was broadcast in 20 or 30 countries around the world. The title to the show, you'll like this, Angry Voters Find Their Voice in Talk Radio. There are those angry white male voters. I was interviewed by a reporter from Le Figaro, the leading French daily, and he wrote a story about my show that appeared in that paper and several others around the world. I even appeared in Costa Rica AM, which is like Good Morning Costa Rica. I was identified in Le Figaro as Marc Scaringi, juriste et militant conservateur. I don't speak French. Does anybody speak French? What does that mean? It sounds a little like angry white male voters. I met briefly with Donald Trump backstage at the Harrisburg Farm Show just prior to the Pennsylvania primary election day. Now, has anybody met Donald Trump in person? What? Will? Okay.
Right here.
All right.
Harrisburg.
Okay.
Well,
And he's kind of like meeting Donald Trump and having a brief interaction with him. It reminded me of Leonardo DiCaprio's character Jay Gatsby in The Great Gatsby. Trump makes you feel like $1 million. He grabbed me by the arm and acted like we were old friends. I'm sure he had no idea who I was, but he acted like we were old friends from the Knickerbocker Club in New York, and we hadn't seen each other for years. And for a moment, I thought he was going to call me old chum. Then came the Pennsylvania primary, and voters streamed to the voting booths, and I tried handing out my palm card, and most voters knew who I was and knew that they were voting for me and the other Trump-endorsed delegates. Many of them already had the Trump palm cards. Others had the list of Trump-endorsed delegates that Sean Hannity posted on his website. And Democrats were coming up to me and asking me, how can they vote for Trump in the primary election? A little more foreboding. I said to them, you'll have to wait until the fall. But you could see it and feel it, as I'm sure most of you, or all of you did, when you were at the polls that primary election. Trump won Pennsylvania bigly, as he would say, and I won my race for delegate in the old 4th Congressional District, which included all of Adams County, I believe, at the time. I beat out 12 other candidates, including 2 incumbent county Republican chairmen, 1 former county chairman, and 2 state representatives. The 3 of us who won, of the 15, were all endorsed by Donald Trump. And that revealed Trump's strength at the grassroots level and the power of his personal endorsement. So I went to the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. It came on the heels of several Trump rallies that had been disrupted by these violent protesters. You'll remember the protesters were physically assaulting the Trump supporters. They were burning and raging and rioting. They even shut down the Trump rally in Chicago. Tensions were very high. Many of us Trump delegates felt like we would be entering a war zone in Cleveland. And some of us were talking about bringing our guns to the convention. And maybe I worked the media a little bit on that angle and got the media all worked up. They had a field day with this. There were headlines such as this one from Mother Jones. Trump delegates were bringing guns to Cleveland. Politics PA report, Trump delegates armed and ready for Cleveland convention. I did not bring my firearm, but I had a lot of fun with that. So once we got to Cleveland, we delegates from the 4th Congressional District, we kept up and turned up our support for Trump. We knew there would be strong efforts to deny Trump the nomination that he so richly deserved and our country so desperately needed. We were in a fighting mood. Seated directly behind us was the Ohio delegation, which was supporting the never-Trumper Governor John Kasich. They refused to stand up when Melania Trump so beautifully and elegantly walked out onto the stage. They booed whenever a speaker said, "Make America Great Again." And to add insult to injury, they voted for John Kasich for president during the floor vote. And Governor Kasich refused to even attend the convention. Remember that? Instead, he traveled all around the city bashing Trump, and that got our blood boiling. And being from Pittsburgh, I don't like Ohio anyway. So I huddled with my group of delegates, and we decided that we were going to give Governor Kasich a loud and unpleasant Pennsylvania greeting. He was scheduled to be our breakfast speaker the next morning. Now, who would schedule John Kasich, a never-Trumper who's bashing Trump, to speak to the Pennsylvania delegation the following morning? In any event, we made one mistake. We told the Ohio delegation, because we had a little brouhaha with them, that we were going to give it to their governor the following morning. So within 15 minutes of me texting one of my friends in the media to give him a heads up, he texted me back a copy of a press release from Kasich's office he had just canceled due to a just discovered scheduling conflict that he discovered at 10:15 that night. So we claimed victory. The media, they ate it up. I tried coining the phrase, Kasich is playing the Hamlet of the Cuyahoga. That made it into the Pittsburgh Tribune, but really didn't catch on. No one knew what it meant. Does anybody read Shakespeare anymore? Seeing that groundswell of support for Trump during the Pennsylvania primary, I knew Trump would carry Pennsylvania in the fall. In fact, I knew it since the beginning of his campaign, when he focused on the America First message on trade and immigration. I knew that message would appeal directly to Reagan Democrats from Pittsburgh, Erie, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre. Those same voters I saw help put Rick Santorum over the top in '94 and Fisher in '96. So for me, it was like deja vu all over again. And I've been writing about a year in my columns about how Trump was going to win the critical swing in Rust Belt states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Now, the Sunday before the general election, I wrote a column in the Harrisburg Patriot News about how Trump would win Pennsylvania and win decisively. I received about 135 comments from readers, just about all negative. So let's have some fun and read just some of them. One wrote, typical Trump-style BS, all cake and icing, no real substance. It takes more than attitude to win an election. A lot of reputations are going to be tarnished come Wednesday morning. Another, you are out of your ever-loving mind. Another, this is good. I hate getting up Mondays, but this op-ed piece had me laughing so hard, it seemed a joy to go to work today. Another, more flies attracted by the dog crap that is done. 48 hours from now, you'll be irrelevantly deplorable. Wow, I guess that sounds pretty bad. Another, looks like someone likes Trump so much he copied his hair and complexion. A little foreboding for the GQ article that came out a year later. Another, just another deplorable. Like cockroaches, they come out of the dark when they think they're safe. Take down names. Remember this lawyer for the scumbag he is. Squash them before they scurry back into the darkness. This is a good one. How did this guy pass the bar exam? And my favorite, who should I vote for? Let's ask Fat White Lump. Yes, I was fat shamed on Penn Live by a liberal, and liberals are supposed to be against fat shaming, right? So I will tell you that on 4 a.m. the morning after the election, after having about 9 gin and tonics, Trump victory party, I did find the time to answer every single one of those 135 comments. Well, those commenters were so wrong because they got their news from the national news media, Trump has coined the fake news, which convinced them that only Hillary could win. Remember how stunned the media, Hollywood, and liberal elites were when Trump won? They had not for one moment believed that a man whom they mocked and disdained could win. In their minds, there could be none other than Hillary Clinton, the doyenne of the establishment. Hillary personified their entire worldview. They were visibly in disbelief and devastated by Hillary's loss because it represented a rejection of everything they stood for. The New World Order of open borders, unlimited immigration, ending foreign wars, and these free trade deals that, in my view, were selling out the middle class to the benefit of these globalists on Wall Street. And as you know, most of the national news media are liberal progressives disguised as impartial journalists. They have controlled the news and skewed it to support their worldview for many decades now. Almost all voted for Hillary. Of the total campaign contributions given to the Clinton and Trump campaigns from people who identified as working in the media, 96% went to Hillary. Our liberal media friends have enjoyed an exalted position in society and have gained and wielded the power to shape and control the culture in which we live. I mean, they were sitting pretty, and then came Donald Trump, like a giant wrecking ball with his loud and brash political incorrectness and his 100 million Twitter followers. Trump exposed the national media for what they are, advocates for their liberal progressive worldview. He's destroying their credibility and exposing their bias. The national media are confronted with the loss of their unearned exalted position in society, and they're fighting back hard, aren't they? I mean, that's why they've invested so much into that fake news about the Trump campaign colluding with the Russian government to hijack the election. That story dominated my talk radio show, which in January of 2017, I moved to WHP 580 and iHeartRadio. I'm on Saturdays 1 to 2, so call in. Cynthia knows. And I also wrote about that fake collusion issue many times in my regular column for Penn Live. It's a critically important story because it's how the national media, in conspiracy with the deep state and the Democratic Party, attempted to destroy the Trump election, and then when that failed, retroactively hijack the election and overturn the will of the American people. It was a soft coup d'etat, and they're not done. As a result, America is at a tipping point as we experience the highest levels of political violence since the 1960s. And Democratic leaders, as well as the media, are to blame. After her loss, Hillary, remember she declared, "I've joined the resistance," and essentially declared the presidency was stolen from her, and Trump a fraud and an illegitimate president. Days after James Hodgkinson, remember that deranged lunatic, tried to kill Republican members of Congress at that baseball field in Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders, one of the leading contenders for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination, urged his followers to act in an unprecedented way, to go big and to fight back against Trump and Republicans in every way. What does every way mean? Hillary said that the Republican Party is the death party, whose health plan will kill people. Representative Luis Gutierrez denounced President Trump as a major criminal who must be eliminated. The president's threat of just a few days ago to enforce immigration law by deporting up to 1 million of those illegal aliens who are, subject to deportation orders, that's triggered the left and the media once again. Just a few days ago, Representative Eric Swalwell from California, another 2020 presidential contender, not for long. If you're Hispanic, there's nothing Donald Trump won't do to break up your family, cage your children, or erase your existence.
Jeez.
And there's nothing we won't do in the streets, courts, and the ballot box to stop him. There's nothing we won't do in the streets. These are calls, yet again, to violence. U.S. Senator Kamala Harris, another 2020 presidential hopeful, just recently wrote in Spanish in an op-ed in the Washington Post, and this is the translation: "When I see Donald Trump abuse the most powerful office in the world to inflict pain on the most vulnerable, it's difficult for me to understand how someone could have such evil." And the media have not condemned Democrats for these wildly false, aggressive, and menacing statements. They're cheering them on. They operate as the official spokesperson for the Democratic National Committee. They've only turned up their attacks on the president. They continue to call him a liar, falsely claim his election was illegitimate, and his presidency a product of collusion with America's supposed enemy, and falsely claim the president is a criminal, and are urging Democrats to bring impeachment proceedings, even though the evidence is overwhelming that the president is the victim of an attempted coup. The media are openly waging political war against our own president in an attempt to delegitimize his presidency and run him out of office. They're not journalists, they're liberal progressive propagandists working hand in glove with the Democratic Party to remove Trump from the office of the presidency by impeachment, election, or otherwise. They are, as Donald Trump says, the enemy of the people. And my friends, we must meet the enemy on the field of political battle. We have the power of ideas, and the outstanding results of the first 2 years of the Trump presidency on our side. We have a booming economy, a resurgence in American manufacturing, which is the bedrock of any wealthy and strong nation, some of the lowest unemployment rates in generations, a border that is finally being defended, a renewed and strengthened U.S. military, and a president who will not back down in the face of these endless onslaughts of lies, slanders, and deceits from those who have been governing this country for their own personal benefit and to the detriment of the American people for many decades now. You know, we finally have a political leader worth fighting for. A man who, in defiance of the entire Republican Party establishment, the entire Democratic Party, and every power center in America and around the world, who is putting America first. If Donald Trump is not reelected, the liberal Democrats who succeed him will quickly turn this country into another failed European-style socialist state, suffocating under high taxes, excessive regulations, government-run health care, and once again dependent upon foreign energy sources. Their insane Green New Deal will shut this economy down, put millions of Americans out of work, and bankrupt our country. They'll open the borders and will be deluged with millions of the world's poorest of the poor, who will come here to take our jobs or live off the generosity of the American taxpayer. They will eliminate Trump's tariffs to benefit their Wall Street friends, and will watch once again as American jobs and factories are shipped south of the border or overseas. And they will coddle and encourage the importation of home growth of a foreign political religious theology that will mark the death knell of Western civilization and Christianity. Friends, Donald Trump has gone to bat for us time and time again, and against overwhelming odds, and we must do the same for him. We must do everything we can to re-elect Donald Trump and keep America great. I will continue to fight the good fight on my talk radio show, in my columns, in my next race for delegate, and in any and every way that I can. And I encourage you to do the same. I know you will. With Donald Trump in the Oval Office, we can defeat this liberal, progressive onslaught that is trying to tear down America. Trump will put America first and restore those traditional values that made us the greatest nation in the history of the world. Together, we will make America great again. Thank you.